It started with those 5 classic words. "I need a break, Mason." She said them with a softness that felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing in front of a mirror, finding just the right balance between pity and resolve. Riel stood at the kitchen counter, swirling her wine glass. I was glistening with a guilt that might have been real. Or maybe it was just for show. I watched her, her posture too straight, like she was bracing for a fight. But there was no fight left in me. I'd been running on fumes for months, ever since she started coming home later, her perfume different, her phone buzzing at midnight with muted laughter. I knew something was off, but I'd hoped it was just work stress or maybe her anxiety flaring up again. But then she said it. "I need a break, Mason." The words hit me harder than any slap. I felt them in my bones. I could almost hear the final click of a door locking behind me. I tried to hold her gaze, but she turned away too quickly, focusing on the swirl of her wine as if it could tell her something she didn't already know. "I have lost myself," she continued. Her voice cracked like a porcelain cup splitting under pressure. "No contact for clarity." That's what she called it. Clarity, like our marriage was some foggy mirror she needed to wipe down alone. I didn't yell, didn't beg, even though part of me wanted to. Wanted to grab her arms and shake her out of whatever trance she'd slipped into. But I didn't, because the woman I married was asking for space, and if space was what she needed, who was I to deny her that? She packed a single duffel bag, just enough clothes for a week, maybe 2, and said she'd stay with her sister, Nain. I watched her move around the apartment, carefully selecting what to take, what to leave behind. Her favorite cardigan, the worn-out yoga pants she always wore on Sundays, a half-empty bottle of rose-scented lotion. It felt like she was curating a version of herself to take on her journey, like I was no longer part of the exhibit. I stood by the doorway silent as she zipped up the bag and looped the handles over her shoulder. She didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push for it. She paused at the door, one hand on the knob, and let out a sigh that sounded like a rehearsal for a different life. "I'll call you when I'm ready," she said, her voice small. I nodded. That was it. No kiss, no promise, just a whisper of an apology and a final click as the door closed behind her. I didn't chase her. I didn't call out. I just stood there staring at the door like it might open again and she'd come back, realizing this was all a mistake. But the silence that followed was a verdict. I let her walk out. I told myself it was what she wanted, what she needed. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling like I just watched the end of something I tried so hard to build. Something that used to make sense, but now felt like a story written in a language I no longer understood. The kitchen smelled like her perfume, a lingering reminder that she'd been here, that she'd once belonged to this space. I looked at the half-empty wine glass on the counter, the smudge of her lipstick on the rim. My chest ached in a way I couldn't quite describe, like a cavity that had been hollowed out and left to echo with every small sound. The clock ticked, relentless, counting down the seconds since she'd left. I wanted to call her, to ask her what she meant by clarity, to beg her to stay. But I didn't, because I wasn't that man anymore. I'd given her space, and I'd given her silence. I wandered into the living room, staring at the couch where we'd sat together so many nights, tangled up in blankets and each other's stories. Now it felt like a museum piece, an artifact of a life that no longer belonged to me. I sank into the cushions and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I didn't know then that I was watching the end begin, that every small choice, every quiet second was leading me to a moment I couldn't yet see. The wine glass in the kitchen gleamed under the overhead light. I thought about washing it, but I left it there, like a reminder, like a question. The air felt different, stiller. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to carry a different tone, a note of finality that rattled my bones. I pressed my palms together, the skin dry and unfamiliar. My thoughts wandered to Nain's place, how Belle would be there, telling stories about our marriage that would paint me as the villain or the victim, depending on the audience. I wondered if she'd mentioned the nights I'd stayed up worrying about her, or the days I'd worked overtime just to give her everything she'd ever asked for. I closed my eyes and let the darkness come. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't call. I wouldn't text. I wouldn't chase her down the path she'd chosen. If she needed space, I'd give it to her. If she needed silence, I'd let the silence fill the air between us like a wall. And in that silence, I'd find my own answers, my own clarity. Because if she could walk out so easily, maybe I needed to know who I was without her. Maybe I'd been holding on too tight to a version of us that no longer existed. So I sat there, breathing in the quiet, letting the weight of her absence sink in. And in that stillness, I realized that sometimes the beginning of the end feels just like any other Tuesday night, just like any other sigh at the door, just like any other whispered, "I just need space." 10 days later, I was scrolling through my phone, mindlessly swiping past the cluttered noise of notifications and updates, trying not to miss her too much. The apartment was too quiet, filled with that stale sort of silence that settles in when you vacuumed and reorganized just to fill the time. I blocked her on most social media accounts after she left, some combination of self-preservation and quiet anger. But I hadn't blocked her mom, Loretta. I guess some part of me wanted to hold on to a lifeline, a way of knowing what was happening without having to ask, a window into the mess. It was late. Somewhere between the hour when the world sleeps and the hour when the insomniacs stir. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, the glow of the screen painting my face in pale blue light, when I saw it. Loretta's post-family reset retreat, feeling grateful. A carousel of sunny photos lined up beneath the caption, a parade of beach chairs and brightly colored cocktails, perfectly manicured toes in the sand. And there she was, Belle, beaming in every single one of them. She looked radiant, hair sunlit and skin glowing. The kind of glow you can't fake with a filter. A 100-watt smile in every frame. But it wasn't the smile that punched me in the gut. It was him, Jared. The same Jared she'd always told me was a harmless high school fling. The he never meant anything guy. The we barely talk guy. And there he was in photo after photo, tanned, shirtless, his arms slung casually around her waist in a way that said he'd done it 1,000 times. Like he'd never stopped. Like I'd never even existed. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening like a fist. Each photo felt like a new slap. There was the one where she wore that orange bikini she'd ordered off some influencer's page. She'd modeled it for me in our bathroom mirror, asking if it made her look too young. There she was, smiling wide, arms around Jared's neck, his hands planted firmly on her hips, like she was proud to be his. Like she'd chosen him long before she chose me. My thumb hovered over the screen, stuck between rage and disbelief. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I just stared. The captions didn't help. Family bonding, grateful for these moments, grateful for him. I scrolled back, hoping, praying that maybe I'd misunderstood, maybe there was some explanation. Maybe Jared was there with his own family and just happened to be in the frame. But every photo told the same story. Her leaning in, eyes bright, smile wide, like this was the life she'd been waiting for. Like every promise she'd made to me was just an afterthought. And in the background, Loretta, smiling like the queen she always wanted to be. Holding court over her perfect family vacation, her perfect daughter, her perfect new son-in-law in waiting. It was too much, too perfect. The rage that simmered under my skin felt foreign, raw, and electric. It felt like betrayal with a capital B. Like I'd been a fool to think she needed space to figure herself out. No, she needed time to figure it out, with Jared's hands on her hips. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to call her, to demand answers, to scream through the phone that she'd lied to me. But I knew better. Knew that if she could smile like that in those photos, then she'd made her choice. And I'd be damned if I let her see me crack. I let the phone drop into my lap, the screen still glowing with her smile. The room felt too small, too empty. I could still smell her perfume on the pillows, the faint echo of her laughter in the walls. But it was all an illusion, a memory that no longer belonged to me. She'd chosen him. Or maybe she'd always wanted him, and I'd just been the placeholder, the bridge she needed to get from one heartbreak to another. The thought made me feel sick. I stood and walked to the kitchen. The overhead light too bright, the white tiles too clean. I gripped the counter and took a breath, letting the anger cool just enough to think straight. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep sitting here scrolling through photos that would only make the wound deeper. I opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and stared at it like it might offer some comfort. But it didn't. Nothing would, because I was alone, and I was the one who let her go. I remembered the way she'd said it, like she was doing me a favor. I need a break, Mason. Like I was the reason she couldn't breathe. Like I'd smothered her dreams and ambitions, and she just needed space to spread her wings. But in those photos, she didn't look like she was searching for herself. She looked like she'd found exactly what she wanted, and it wasn't me. I walked back to the living room, phone still in hand. I clicked on Loretta's post again, forcing myself to look at every photo, every detail. The palm trees swaying in the background, the turquoise water glistening, the cocktails sweating in the heat. It looked like paradise, a place where heartbreak couldn't reach. I wondered if she'd thought of me at all, if even for a second she'd felt the ache of the space she'd left behind. Probably not. Not with Jared there to fill in the blanks. I sank into the couch, feeling the weight of my own decisions. I could call her. I could send a text demanding answers, but what would that prove? That I was weak enough to beg for an explanation she'd never give? That I was still tethered to a woman who'd chosen to let another man's hands rest on her hips while she laughed at the waves? No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I wouldn't give her the power to decide how I felt about myself. So I sat there in the dark, phone screen fading to black, and made a promise to myself. I'd let her have her vacation. Let her of Jared. Let her have the bright sun and the perfect smiles and the fake captions. Because I didn't need them. I didn't need her. I needed the truth. And the truth was simple. She'd shown me exactly who she was. And now it was up to me to decide what to do with that. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. The city hummed with late-night traffic and neon signs. People living their lives, laughing, crying, moving on. And I realized I could too. I wasn't trapped in her story anymore. I was free to write my own. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. It wouldn't include her. Not on my terms, not in my home, and definitely not in my heart. I turned back toward the living room, the phone still in my hand. I opened the app and blocked her mom. One less window into a life that didn't include me. One less reminder of what I'd lost. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and felt the first real sense of peace I'd felt in days. She was gone. And maybe that was the best gift she'd ever given me. I didn't scream, didn't call, didn't even leave a voice note. Instead, I did what I'd always done when the world felt too big, too sharp. I retreated. I spent the weekend in the spare room, our guest room, the one she'd always said was too empty. But I'd always found a strange comfort in its darkness. A simple bed, a nightstand, a small lamp, and a blank wall. A place to think without the clutter of memories. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken of Loretta's post. The ones with Belle's smile and Jared's arms like iron bars around her waist. Each image was like a nail in the coffin of the life I'd thought I'd been building. But I didn't let the grief swallow me. I let it harden me. When the sun rose on Saturday, I went to work. Every step was deliberate. I started in the closet, her side, the side I'd carefully given her when we first moved in. The side that smelled like lavender and warm vanilla, and a hint of the sandalwood cologne I used to wear just because she liked it. I opened the sliding door and stared at the rows of clothes. Some new, some worn, some never even tried on. A life in fabric. I reached for the first item, a floral dress she'd worn to my promotion dinner, and folded it neatly, placing it into a sturdy box I'd labeled in black marker. Box 1. Dresses and skirts. It felt clinical, safe, like a process with a beginning and an end, like I could control something again. I worked through her wardrobe methodically, folding each piece with the same precision I'd once reserved for arranging her flowers on Sunday mornings. Every blouse, every sweater, every pair of yoga pants, each went into its own box, labeled and numbered. Box 2, Box 3, Box 4. I made an inventory list for each one, snapped photos of the contents and attached them to the top of the boxes with clear packing tape. No confusion, no mistakes, nothing she could accuse me of misplacing. I moved to the bathroom next, her half-empty bottles of shampoo and conditioner, the bath salts she'd always bought from that overpriced spa, her makeup bag with the broken zipper. Box 5, Bathroom Essentials. The living room was harder, her paintbrushes lined up like soldiers on the bookshelf. The canvas she'd been working on, a swirl of greens and golds that might have been a landscape or maybe just an emotional exorcism, sat on the coffee table. I hesitated. Art had always been her escape, her therapy. I'd respected that, but now, even her therapy felt like a lie. I wrapped the canvas carefully in bubble wrap, 3 layers, and placed it in box 6, Art Supplies. Each brush got its own sleeve of paper, its own label. I wasn't taking chances. The kitchen was next. Her mismatched mugs, some chipped, some with lipstick stains, went into box 7, Kitchen Items. I could still see her sipping coffee on sleepy mornings, legs tucked under her on the bar stool, telling me about her dreams. Now, I just saw betrayal. I took each item, wrapped it, photographed it, labeled it. No arguments, no denials. Every mug accounted for, every glass protected. By the time I reached the bedroom again, the sun was slipping toward the horizon, and the air smelled like dust and cardboard. I sat on the bed, our bed, though it felt foreign now, and stared at the last few items. Her grandmother's earrings, small and delicate, the ones she'd worn on our wedding day. The necklace I'd given her on our first anniversary. The one she'd worn the night we danced under fairy lights in our tiny backyard. I wrapped them in bubble wrap, placed them in a velvet pouch, and marked them. Box 8, Jewelry and Keepsakes. It all felt so final. 12 boxes. 12 neat little coffins for every piece of her life that had bled into mine. I stacked them by the door, each one marked with an inventory sheet and a fragile sticker. I took photos of every box, top, sides, bottom, and saved them to a folder titled Belle's Property. I didn't want a single accusation of theft, no loopholes for her to exploit later, every detail accounted for. Then I went online, filled out the forms, and scheduled the courier to pick them up on Monday morning. Address: Loretta and Carlton's home. I wondered if they'd sign for them together, grinning at each other like conspirators. I wondered if Jared would be there, carrying her boxes inside like he was already moving her into a new life. I imagined Loretta's face, tight-lipped and dignified, watching me get erased from her daughter's story one box at a time. The thought didn't sting as much as I expected. I think I'd run out of pain. When I was done, I vacuumed the rug. It felt like a reset, like wiping away the dust of a betrayal that had grown too heavy to bear. The lines in the carpet made perfect stripes under the lamplight, a small piece of order in a life that had gone so chaotically wrong. I took one last look at the boxes, neat, labeled, final, and felt something shift in my chest, a sense of peace I hadn't expected. Because this was closure. This was the end. There'd be no messy fights about what belonged to home. No teary-eyed phone calls begging me to leave things at her sister's. Everything was handled professionally, properly. I went to my phone and updated my relationship status to single. It felt like a small victory, like a step forward. I blocked her. I blocked Loretta. I blocked Jared. It was a digital quarantine, a way to keep the infection of their betrayal from spreading any further into my life. The notifications would stop. The photos would vanish. The smiling faces and bright captions would disappear from my feed. I'd made sure of it. When I finished, I stood in the center of the apartment, our apartment, and took a deep breath. The space felt different now, lighter, like a storm had passed and left behind a clearer sky. I could see the future again, even if it was blurry and uncertain. But at least it was mine now. No one else's fingerprints on it, just me and the choices I'd made to protect myself. I turned off the lights and let the darkness settle around me. The boxes stood like silent sentinels waiting for the morning. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even sigh. I just let the quiet fill the room. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her to come back. I wasn't waiting for anything. Because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. And I'd already decided no contact, no drama, no regrets, just a clean break, a new beginning. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something stronger than what we'd had. Because sometimes, the best way to heal is to pack it all up and ship it away. 3 weeks of silence settled like a weighted blanket on my chest, pressing down every time I walked into the apartment and didn't hear her voice. The first few days, I half expected her to call, to text, to say she'd changed her mind, but nothing came. The quiet stretched into days, and then into nights where the ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall sounded louder than my own breathing. I filled the time with long hours at the gym, overtime at work, meal preps I never used to do alone. I told myself I was finding peace in the quiet. And maybe I was. Maybe that was the only way to heal. Then my phone buzzed, interrupting my dinner of reheated chicken and cold rice. An unknown number lit up the screen. For a second, my chest tightened. It couldn't be her. She'd made her choice. But curiosity won. I picked up. Hello? My voice was calm, steady, like I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. There was a pause, a soft intake of breath on the other end. Then her voice soft as rain. Mason, it's me. Even after everything, hearing her voice felt like a blade. I closed my eyes, letting it slide between my ribs. I tried to picture her face, those honey-brown eyes that used to shine whenever I walked through the door, the way her lips curled when she was about to laugh. But all I could see was her smile in Jared's arms, bright and easy, like the pain she'd left me with didn't exist. "Hi, Belle," I said. My tone polite but cold, like I was talking to a distant acquaintance, not the woman I'd promised forever to. She must have felt the chill. She hesitated. "I've been thinking." She started the words slow and careful, like stepping onto thin ice. "About us. About everything. I think I'm ready to talk, really talk. I've been working through things and I want to try with us." Her voice cracked, and for a second I wondered if she was crying. The old me would have leapt to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, that we'd figure it out together. But that man was gone. He packed up her life in 12 boxes and sent it to her mother's house. He vacuumed the rug and blocked her number. He decided that peace meant silence. I didn't answer right away. I let the pause stretch until it was uncomfortable. I wanted her to feel it, to know that this wasn't her story to write anymore. Finally, I took a breath and said it. "There is no us, Belle." The words came out level, sharp, no tremble, no apology, just the truth. She sucked in a breath, and I imagined her eyes widening in that way they always did when she didn't get what she wanted. "Mason," she whispered, "please. I've been working on myself. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I needed time. I needed to figure out who I was without you." Her voice broke again. "I just want to try. Just one more chance." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone like it was the last lifeline between me and the past. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it break me. I'd given her all the chances she'd asked for. I'd given her space. I'd given her time. I'd given her everything, even when it hurt. But I wasn't going to give her more than I had left. "Real," I said, my voice steady. "You had your chance. You made your choice. I'm not a backup plan." Silence on the other end, the kind of silence that vibrates with regret. I could almost see her standing somewhere she thought was safe, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide with the realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't coming back. "Mason." She tried again, her voice smaller now. "Please don't do this. We were good together. I just got confused." I almost laughed, but it came out as a dry exhale. "Confused," I repeated, rolling the word around in my mouth like it was something I'd never heard before. "Is that what they call it when you're on a beach with your ex-boyfriend's hands on your hips?" The words hung in the air like smoke. She didn't answer. Couldn't answer because we both knew the truth and there was no way to spin it. "Look," I continued, my voice like cold steel. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to beg. I'm not even going to blame you anymore. But there's nothing left for us to fix. You walked out. You asked for space and I gave it to you." I paused, letting that sink in. Turns out that space was enough for me to figure out who I was without you. A muffled sob came through the line, and for a brief second I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered the screenshots, the laughter, the way she looked at him like he was the answer to a question I hadn't even known she was asking. And I hardened again. "Goodbye," I said. Then I hung up. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was freeing. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. It screamed, black and lifeless. I ran a hand through my hair and exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'd done it. I'd said the words that had been building inside me for weeks. The words that marked the true end, and it felt like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck too long. Painful, but necessary. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The lights glowed like stars against the darkness, each one a reminder that life went on, that somewhere someone was starting fresh. Maybe that someone could be me. I'd spent so long defining myself by her, by us, that I'd forgotten there was a me in the middle of it all. A man who'd given everything and asked for so little. A man who'd believed in loyalty and trust and promises made under moonlight skies. And now I was a man who knew his worth, who knew that sometimes loving someone meant letting them go, letting them figure themselves out, far away from the pieces of you they'd already broken. I turned away from the window, the city's glow still warm on my skin, and felt something new settle in my chest. Something strong, something like peace. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to know. I was enough, just as I was. And that was a truth she could never take from me again. She tried to pretend confusion the way she always did when she got caught. I could almost hear the rehearsed innocence in her voice, the way her tone shifted as if I were being unfair. "Mason, I don't understand. The break wasn't a breakup," she said, her voice strained through the speaker. I imagined her twisting a lock of hair around her finger, biting her lip like she used to do when she was waiting for me to say something comforting. But I wasn't that man anymore. Her performance didn't move me. She paused, probably waiting for me to jump in with forgiveness, with reassurance, with a promise that I'd wait while she figured herself out. But silence stretched between us like a taut rope. "Jared," I said flatly. "Your mom's photos, his hands on your hips. That didn't look like confusion, Belle. That looked like a choice." I could hear her swallow. That small sound gave me a grim satisfaction. "Jared was just there," she said quickly, as though proximity justified betrayal. "He's been going through stuff too, and I didn't plan it." My mom was clueless about how social media works. She just wanted a family album, that's all. Her voice wavered, but I could almost picture her face, eyes wide, trying to sell the lie. She'd always been good at that. Too good. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "You didn't plan it," I echoed, "but you sure as hell posed for it." I felt my voice tighten with every word, each syllable a hook pulling up memories I didn't want to relive. Her laughter, her smell, the way she'd leaned into me and said I was the only man she'd ever really loved. Now those memories felt like stories from a book I'd never wanted to read. She sniffled. "Mason, please. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a break. Time for me to think. You were supposed to give me space, not judge me like this." Her tone shifted again, that edge of defensiveness creeping in. I recognized it, the way she'd always turned the blame back on me, the way she'd made me question my own instincts. Not this time. "Space," I repeated. "That's what you called it. Space. And what did you do with that space? You filled it with him. That's not confusion, Belle. That's betrayal." I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. Cars drifted past like lazy fireflies. Somewhere down there, people were living lives that hadn't been shattered by lies. She started to panic. I could hear it. "Mason, my sketchbooks, my grandmother's earrings. Where are they? Please, those are important to me." Her words came in a rush like a dam breaking. "Please tell me you didn't just throw everything away." I imagined her rummaging through her sister's spare room, finding nothing of hers, realizing I'd stripped her from my space like peeling off old wallpaper. "They're in box 8, I said calmly. "Bubble-wrapped, labeled, shipped to your parents' place. I made an inventory list. Everything's accounted for." "You're welcome." Her breath hitched, and I almost felt the pang of pity. But that passed as quickly as it came, because this was the woman who lied to my face and thought I'd just let it slide. "God, Mason, why are you being so vindictive?" she spat, the anger finally breaking through the cracks in her voice. "I didn't do anything that bad. I just needed time." I felt my jaw tighten. Vindictive, that's what she called it. as if what I'd done was out of spite and not necessity.
Vindictive, I repeated, my tone even controlled. No, Belle, I'm being thorough, so there's no confusion. So there's no, maybe it got lost or I forgot. I made sure you got every last piece of the life you left behind. Every last muck, every last hairpin, every last hope I had in us. My voice trembled at the edge of that last word, but I steadied it. She let out a soft sob like she was shocked by my coldness. I can't believe you're being like this, she whispered, her voice small. We were supposed to be partners. You said you'd always support me, even when things got hard. I clenched my teeth. Partners? That was a word she'd used so often, but it had lost its meaning. Partners don't abandon each other at the first sign of difficulty. Partners don't find comfort in old flames when things get complicated. We were partners, I agreed, until you stopped being one. I let the silence stretch again, giving her time to absorb it. You chose your path. You chose your support system. You chose Jared. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was sharp enough to do the cutting. She sniffled again, and I could almost picture the tears. I just wanted to feel alive again, she said softly. Everything got so heavy between us. Work, bills, the pressure. I needed to remember who I was before it all. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you, I sighed, a deep, tired exhale. But you did, I said. And the thing is, I'm done carrying the weight of your confusion. You wanted to figure yourself out. That's fine. But don't ask me to clean up the mess after. I ran a hand through my hair, the tension easing from my shoulders as the words fell into place. Your things are at your parents'. Your art, your memories, everything you left behind. I made sure you got it all because that's who I am. That's the man you left. A man who finishes what he starts. She was crying now, the sound muffled and ragged. Mason, please, she whimpered. But I was done with please. I was done with maybe. I was done with all the half-finished promises and half-felt apologies. Goodbye, Belle, I said. My voice was calm, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind in my hair, ready to let go of the last thing that tethered me to her. I ended the call before she could respond. I leaned against the window frame, letting the cool glass steady me. Outside, the night was alive with the sounds of cars, laughter, and the distant echo of a world that didn't care about my heartbreak. I breathed deeply, feeling the air fill my lungs with something close to relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd done something for myself. Like I'd drawn a line in the sand and refused to let her step over it again. I glanced around the apartment, clean, quiet, my own. No more wondering if she'd come back, no more waiting for apologies. Just me. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what closure really looked like. A night alone with your own voice, telling you that you did the right thing. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle in, feeling more peace in that emptiness than I'd ever felt in her arms. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop being the safety net for someone else's free fall. And in that darkness, I found my own light. I thought it was over. I thought my boxes and my silence had drawn a line in the sand she'd never cross again. But betrayal has a way of crawling back in like mold in the corners you thought you'd cleaned. It was late, nearly midnight, when I pulled into the parking lot, exhausted from a shift that felt like it would never end. I'd been working extra hours, pouring myself into projects, anything to fill the empty spaces she'd left behind. The apartment had started to feel like mine again, a sanctuary. But the moment I swung my car door shut, I knew something was wrong. They were there on my steps, framed by the dull yellow glow of the porch light. Belle, red-eyed, clutching the edges of her sweater like a lifeline. And beside her,
Arms folded and jaw set like a courtroom judge stood Loretta, always so composed, always so certain of her own righteousness. I paused, keys in hand, staring at them like I'd stumbled onto the wrong movie set. "We need to talk properly," Loretta said before I even reached the bottom step face to face. Her voice carried the same commanding tone that had once made me think she cared about me back when I was the golden boy who'd married her daughter, the one she bragged about at brunch. Now, it just sounded like an accusation. Belle's eyes were wet and pleading. "Mason, please," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We never really talked about what happened." "Not really. I need to explain." I let her words hang in the air, their weight settling like dust on an old book I'd stopped reading a long time ago. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I stood my ground. "You had your chance," I said, each word measured. "You had 3 weeks to reach out, to say something that didn't come with excuses or deflections." My voice was calm, but my hands were tied on my keys as if I might need them to anchor myself. Loretta stepped forward like she was preparing a closing argument. "Mason, this is your marriage we're talking about," she said, her eyes sharp. "You don't just throw that away because of one mistake. She made a poor decision. She knows that now. You should have given her time. You should have given her grace." Grace. The word stung like salt in a wound. Grace was what I'd given her every time she'd stayed late at the office and came home with excuses. Grace was what I'd given her when she said she needed space, but didn't mention that space came with Jared's arms around her waist. 1. Grace was the reason I'd packed her life into neat boxes instead of dumping it on the curb. Belle wiped at her tears, her mascara smudging under her eyes. "Jared was a mistake," she said, voice trembling. "I swear, Mason, it didn't mean anything. I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. I needed to feel something, and he was just there." Her words were frantic, desperate, like a drowning woman reaching for anything that would keep her afloat. I met her gaze without flinching. "Mistakes," I said. "Mistakes of forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. Mistakes don't usually require swimsuits and matching cocktails." My tone was ice cold, but I didn't feel cold inside. I felt alive. Like every piece of myself she'd chipped away, I was finally growing back. Belle flinched and Loretta's face darkened. "That's not fair," she snapped. "You know, social media makes things look worse than they are." "You should have waited for her to explain before you packed her things and shut her out." Her voice dripped with authority, the kind that expects obedience. I let out a breath, steady and controlled. "Loretta, I didn't ask her to lie. I didn't ask her to pose for pictures with her ex. I didn't ask her to put me on hold while she figured herself out. But I did make sure she had every single one of her things wrapped, labeled, and delivered. Because that's the kind of man I am." Belle's lower lip quivered. "Mason, I love you," she whispered. I messed up. I need you to forgive me. We can fix this. I know we can't." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for the softness she'd always found in me, but there was no softness left for her. I shook my head slowly. "Brielle," I said, my voice a quiet finality. "Love doesn't look like betrayal. It doesn't look like secrets and silent retreats. Love is trust, and you broke that." I took a step closer, but not to hold her. Just enough to let her see that I wasn't afraid of her tears anymore. "I gave you space. I gave you respect. I gave you every chance. But I'm done giving." She started to cry, shoulders shaking. Loretta reached out to steady her, but her eyes never left me calculating. "Sharp, you'll regret this," she said coldly. You'll see what happens when you throw away a marriage like it's nothing."
She tightened her grip on Belle's arm and pulled her a step back.
I let the words hang in the night air, but they didn't pierce me. "Not anymore." "Maybe I will," I said quietly. "But at least I'll know I didn't let myself be a doormat." I turned and unlocked the door, the key sliding into the lock with a satisfying click. Before I pushed it open, I looked back at them one last time. "Good night," I said, and then I stepped inside and closed the door, leaving them on the steps with their regrets and excuses. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the distant city sounds. I leaned against the door, breathing in the silence like oxygen. I braced myself for the pain of this confrontation, but instead, I felt lighter, like I'd finally shut the last window she'd left open. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let it cool my throat. Outside, their voices faded as they left, the click of their heels on the concrete, a slow retreat. I set the glass down and exhaled. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need her apologies. I'd given my all, and she'd spend it. Now it was my turn to spend time on me, my peace, my healing, my own life. As I turned off the lights and headed for the bedroom, I realized that sometimes closure doesn't come with a bow or a neat explanation. Sometimes it comes with a locked door and the knowledge that you were strong enough to close it yourself, and that was enough for me. "You changed the locks?" Her voice cracked through the speaker like thunder on a dry day. I could practically see her face, eyes wide, lips trembling, hands on hips like she'd just been wronged. I stayed quiet for a second, letting the question settle as though it deserved a reply beyond the obvious. Of course I changed the locks. What did she expect? That I leave the door wide open for her to walk back in, arms full of excuses and cheap apologies? "Yes," I said finally, my tone even. I was proud of how steady it came out. Unshaken by the tremor in her voice, I had changed the locks. It's my apartment now, my space. I'm done leaving it open for someone who doesn't live here anymore. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. It was her tell, the sound she always made when she was about to launch into an argument. I braced myself, leaning against the kitchen counter, the cold marble pressing into my palms like an anchor. "You threw away my plant or two, didn't you?" she demanded. "The one with the succulents from our anniversary trip. How could you just—" I cut her off. "Box 3, I said, my voice calm but firm. "Labeled, padded, double-wrapped, sent to your parents' place along with everything else." I let the silence stretch, picturing her face in that moment, the indignation deflating like a popped balloon. Loretta's voice cut in next, sharp, brittle, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. "Mason, you humiliated my daughter," she snapped. "She's been through enough without you treating her like a criminal. You boxed up her life and shipped it away like garbage. How dare you?" I could almost see her standing in her designer flats and holding a cup of herbal tea like a gazelle. She'd always carried herself like a judge, all stern authority and righteous anger. But not tonight. Tonight, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "I didn't humiliate her," I said, my voice steady as stone. I respected her decision to leave. I respected her space. I respected her enough to pack her things with care. Everything she left behind, every paintbrush, every mug, every goddamn memory. I treated it like it mattered because it did. To me, it did. And now it's hers again. I didn't throw away a single thing. I let the weight of my words hang there, filling the space where her judgment tried to settle. Belle tried to jump in then, her voice shaky. "Mason, I didn't mean for things to get so complicated," she pleaded. "I just needed time to breathe, to figure myself out. You always rushed me. You never gave me the space to—" I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. "You left, Belle. You chose space and I gave it to you. But you didn't need space. You needed an alibi. And I'm done giving you that. She went silent. The only sound on the line was her shaky breath, as if she was trying to figure out which line might still work on me. Loretta, though, wasn't done. She's your wife, she said, her voice lowering into that scolding tone that always made me grip my teeth. You took vows. You promised to stand by her through everything. You can't just walk away because things got difficult. I felt my jaw tighten, the memory of that wedding day pressing against my skull like a bad dream. The white dress, the trembling hands, the vows whispered like secrets. I'd meant every word. I'd stood by her when her father got sick, when her career hit a wall, when she said she didn't know who she was anymore. I'd given her everything. And what had she given me? A break. Space. Jared's hands on her hips. You're right, Loretta, I said, my voice low and steady. I did take vows. I took them seriously. Every day. Every night. I put her first even when it cost me sleep, when it cost me peace, when it cost me myself. But she broke those vows the moment she found comfort in someone else's arms. The moment she decided my loyalty was something she could take for granted. My voice caught for a fraction of a second, but I pressed on. So no, I don't owe her an open door. I don't owe her a second chance to hurt me, and I sure as hell don't owe you an explanation for choosing to protect my own damn heart. The line went quiet. Just the hum of the city outside my window and the echo of my own words ringing in my ears. I could imagine them standing there, Belle looking small and shaken. Loretta's lips pursed in anger. Good, let them stew in it. Let them see the man I'd become. Look, I said after a moment, softer now but no less certain. I didn't ask her to leave. I didn't ask her to lie. But I'm not going to be the one who keeps pretending everything's okay just because it makes things easier for her. She wanted a new chapter. Fine. But she doesn't get to keep using my pages. I let the words settle, final and heavy. A truth I'd been holding inside for too long. Belle let out a choked sob. Mason, I just wanted us to be happy, she whispered. Her voice was small, lost. The voice of a girl who'd always had a safety net and now realized it was gone. We had something good. I messed up, I know. But can't we just start over? Can't we try? I felt something break inside me. Then a sharp pain that flared and then dulled into a quiet resignation. You're right, I said. Voice steady but soft. We did have something good once, but you broke it. And I can't pretend it didn't happen. I won't, because every time I look at you, I'll see him. Every time I hear your voice, I'll hear the lies you told me. And I deserve better than that. I deserve a life without wondering when the next betrayal will come. Loretta muttered something under her breath, something like, unbelievable. But I didn't respond. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd drawn the line, and it felt like the first honest breath I'd taken in months. I heard Belle's voice one last time, small and trembling. I don't know how to let you go, she said like a confession. I closed my eyes, my heart steady. You don't have to, I told her, because I already did. I ended the call and set the phone down. The room was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. I looked around at the boxes I'd packed, the couch I'd picked out, the framed photo of my late father on the bookshelf. Everything in this space was mine again. The lock on the door felt solid, secure. The barrier I'd needed between the man I'd been and the man I was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I'd won something. My peace. My dignity, my freedom, and I wasn't about to let them take that away.
10 days later, I was heading into the weekend with a semblance of calm when an email hit my inbox with the subject line, "Formal Notice of Claim." The sender, Belle's lawyer. I let out a slow breath and clicked it open, bracing myself for the worst. The message was short and clinical, as though we'd never shared a life together, like I was just a name on a spreadsheet. Belle was demanding $6,000 for emotional distress and displacement. She claimed I'd mishandled shared property, her sketchbooks, her jewelry, even a half-used bottle of her favorite perfume. She claimed I'd been vindictive, that I'd abandoned her without notice. I stared at the words, letting them sink in like water in a cracked foundation. For a minute, my hands shook. The nerve of her. After everything, after the photos, after Jared's hands on her hips and her mother's lectures on loyalty, she had the audacity to accuse me of wrongdoing. I closed my eyes, letting the anger wash over me before I picked up the phone. Grace. I'd hired her a week after Belle left, a no-nonsense lawyer with a reputation for turning messy divorces into clean exits. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Mason, I was about to call you." "I saw the email," she said, already one step ahead. I explained what I'd read, my voice tight. She listened without interruption, her silence a steady bomb against the rage that threatened to boil over. When I was done, she let out a small laugh, cold like ice breaking in a glass. "They're trying to rattle you," she said. "Don't let them." I exhaled, my shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "What do we do?" I asked. She chuckled again, this time with an edge of satisfaction. "We respond," she said, "with receipts." In response, she did. By the time Monday morning rolled around, Grace had drafted a letter so sharp it could have cut through steel. She attached the courier receipts, every box I'd sent, each one marked fragile, with a tracking number and the signature from Belle's father, Carlton. She included photos of the boxes, neatly sealed and labeled, each one with its own inventory list. There was no room for doubt. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. Nothing was thrown away. She even included screenshots of Loretta's vacation album, the one where Belle's smile lit up the screen while Jared's hand rested on her hip, just to remind them that I hadn't abandoned her. She'd abandoned me. Grace's letter ended with a simple, brutal line. "Any further harassment will be met with a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress." I read the draft 3 times, each time feeling the knot in my chest loosen just a bit more. I imagined Belle opening that email, the color draining from her face as she realized she wasn't the only one who could play the game. I imagined Loretta reading it too, her righteous indignation withering under the weight of cold, hard evidence. Part of me felt petty, but most of me felt relieved. This was my line in the sand. No more tears, no more apologies, just the truth. That night I poured myself a drink, a cheap whiskey I'd picked up at the corner store, and sat on the couch, staring at the city lights through the window. I let the amber liquid burn its way down my throat, a reminder that sometimes the hardest medicine was the one that tasted the worst. I thought about the emails, the boxes, the months of silence that had turned my heart into something harder than it had ever been. I wondered if Belle thought she could just snap her fingers and make it all go away. Maybe she'd thought I'd crumble the way I used to, that I'd drop everything and beg her to come back. But that man was gone, buried under the weight of her lies. Grace called the next morning, her voice triumphant. "She's rattled," she said. "Her lawyer called me twice trying to negotiate. I told him to save it for the courtroom. I'm not here to negotiate with people who think they can rewrite history." I let out a dry laugh. "You're good at this," I said. She didn't laugh. "Mason, I'm good at my job because I believe in facts," she replied, "and the facts are on your side. Let them chase their own shadows.
We'll stay right here. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I hadn't just survived this mess. I'd fought back on my terms. I'd drawn my own boundaries and held them. I'd watched the people who thought they could control me stumble over their own arrogance. And it felt good. Not vengeful, just clean, like the first breath of air after a long storm. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my emails, looking at the reply Grace had sent, each attachment carefully labeled, each screenshot like a shield. I thought about Belle's lawyer, reading through them line by line, realizing how meticulously I documented every detail of her departure. I thought about Loretta's self-righteous lectures, crumbling under the evidence of her own social media posts. It was like building a wall between me and their chaos. A wall made of receipts and truth. And behind the wall, I felt safe. I poured another glass of whiskey and raised it in a quiet toast to myself. To the man who didn't yell, to the man who didn't bake, to the man who learned that sometimes the strongest weapon is silence, and a good lawyer. I thought about all the times I'd given Belle the benefit of the doubt, the grace she'd never given me. I thought about the nights I'd sat awake wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed her. But the evidence didn't lie. The boxes didn't lie. The photos didn't lie. And that was the difference between me and her. I hadn't hidden anything. I hadn't run away from my choices. I'd faced them, and I'd survived. The apartment felt different that night. Warmer, lighter, like a place I could actually call home again. No more wondering if she'd come back. No more checking my phone for messages that never came. Just me, my couch, my whiskey, and the knowledge that I'd fought for myself and won. I turned on the TV and let the noise fill the space where her laughter used to echo. It wasn't the same, but it was enough. As I watched the credits roll on some mindless sitcom, I thought about the line Grace had written at the end of her letter. Any further harassment will be met with a counter-ruit. I let the words sink in. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't the man who'd wait for her to change her mind. I was the man who learned that sometimes love doesn't mean waiting. Sometimes it means letting go, no matter how much it hurts. I raised my glass one last time, the amber liquid catching the light like a promise. Here's to me, I whispered, to the man who stayed, and as I drank I felt the strength settle in my bones, steady and unbreakable. I'd faced the storm, I'd weathered it, and I was still here. And that, I realized, was enough. More than enough. Word got around faster than I expected. It started with whispers at the office, an offhand comment at the coffee shop, and neighbors' knowing glance in the elevator. I should have known Belle wouldn't keep her meltdown private. When people get caught, they flail. They grab at any attention that might paint them as the victim, rewrite the story in their favor. But screenshots don't lie, and I had plenty of those. Her meltdown came at me like a summer storm, loud, unpredictable, but easy enough to stand under if you'd prepared. And I had. Jared ghosted her. That was the word that trickled down from mutuals who couldn't help but share every detail. Turns out, he couldn't handle her baggage. Or maybe he'd realized she wasn't the perfect second chance he'd imagined. I didn't celebrate his absence, but I also didn't mourn it. Jared was her problem now. Let him handle the tears and the confusion and the constant need for reassurance. I was done with all of that. Belle's meltdown was public, too. A friend of a friend messaged me screenshots of her posts, cryptic quotes about heartbreak, blurry photos of tears, captions that painted me as the cold-hearted man who boxed her out of his life. I read them with a kind of detached curiosity, like I was looking at a stranger's drama instead of my own. She called me unfeeling, manipulative, A man who'd shipped her life away with barcodes. The phrase made me laugh. I'd always believed in order and accountability. She'd called that controlling. Now it was a shield between us, a shield I was grateful for. Loretta tried to stir the pot among our old friends. She called them one by one, telling them how heartless I'd been, how I'd turned my back on her daughter when she needed me most. She left out the part about Jared. She left out the part where Belle had chosen to leave to find herself in someone else's arms. But receipts don't lie. And when people started asking the right questions, Loretta's voice started to tremble. Because the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. No matter how many lies you pile on top, people started to reach out, some with concern, others with curiosity, a few with apologies. I listened to each one, measured my words carefully. I wasn't about to get drawn into a pity party or a debate about who was right or wrong. I'd said my piece. I'd given her her space. The boxes were delivered, the receipts were in order, and the locks were changed. My conscience was clean. One evening, I got a text from a friend who'd known both of us since college. "Man, I'm sorry," it read. "I saw what she posted, but I also saw the screenshots. Don't let her drag you down. You did what you had to do." I stared at the message, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. It wasn't about vindication. It was about being seen. About knowing someone else understood the line I'd drawn, the boundaries I'd enforced. I wrote back, "Thanks, I'm good. Just focusing on moving forward." And I meant it. I'd stopped checking her accounts by then. I didn't need to see the drama unfold in real time. I didn't need the reminder that she'd chosen the public eye over a private apology. Let her tell her story to whoever would listen. I had my own story to live, and it didn't include her anymore. One night, a mutual friend called me. His voice was tight, hesitant. "Mason, I hate to even bring this up, but she's saying you threw out her sketchbooks, that you took her grandmother's earrings and sold them. That you... I don't know, man. People are talking." I let out a breath. "Steady, calm. Tell them to ask her parents," I said. "Tell them to ask for the courier receipts, the photos of every single item. Everything's documented, everything's accounted for. The earrings are in box A. The sketchbooks are wrapped in tissue paper, labeled, delivered, and signed for by her father." He was quiet on the other end. I figured. He said, "Just thought you should know." I thanked him and ended the call, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the last piece of her drama slip off my shoulders like a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The city felt different after that. Cleaner somehow. The same streets I'd walked with her felt whiter, brighter. The air felt easier to breathe. I started going for evening runs, letting the rhythm of my footsteps pound out the last echoes of her voice in my head. I'd come home sweaty and tired and stand under the shower with the water beating down on me like rain. And each time I felt lighter. I started to see people again, old friends, new faces. I found myself at a bar one Friday night, laughing at a story I'd heard 1,000 times before. But for the first time in ages, it felt new. I ordered a drink and toasted to the man I was becoming. The man who knew his worth. The man who'd learned that some people's apologies come too late. And that was okay. I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need her validation. I'd given myself enough closure to last a lifetime. One afternoon, I got a final email from Grace. No further contact from her lawyer, she wrote. No countersuit, no claim, just silence. "Congratulations, Mason. You're free." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. "You're free." It felt like a benediction, like a door swinging open on a new life. That night, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, no whiskey, just something warm and comforting. I scrolled through the photos on my phone. Sunsets, my nephew's birthday party, the view from my new office. No photos of her, no photos of us, just moments that were mine. I realized then that the best revenge wasn't a fiery email or a countersuit or even a perfectly wrapped box. The best revenge was living my life with peace, with dignity, with a heart that no longer needed her to understand why she'd lost me. Let her unpack her mess. Let her tell her story to whoever would listen. My story was simple. I survived. I healed. I thrived. And now every step I took was a step away from the chaos she'd left behind. Let them talk. Let them wonder. I had receipts. I had the truth. But most of all, I had myself. And that was worth more than any apology she could ever give. It's been quiet, peaceful even. The apartment feels like mine now, every corner echoing with a kind of calm I hadn't realized I'd been craving. No more scented oils on the bookshelf. No more half-finished mugs of coffee abandoned in the sink. No more passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge reminding me to buy almond milk or empty the dishwasher. Just me and the rhythm of my own breathing, my own routines. My gym shoes sit neatly by the door, a reminder of the runs that have become my new therapy. The way the pavement feels solid under my feet, each step a declaration that I'm moving forward one stride at a time. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. No more questions that would never be answered. Just sweat and breath and the steady beat of my own heart. And it feels good. It feels like freedom. I've started dating again, nothing serious, just light dinners, easy conversations, laughter that doesn't come with strings attached. No one's asking me to fix their broken pieces, and I'm not offering mine either. It's refreshing. The first date was a quiet dinner with a woman named Lydia. She's smart, funny, the kind of person who listens without waiting to speak. We talked about movies and books and the weird way city lights look on rainy nights. She didn't ask me about Belle, and I didn't bring her up because this is my time now, my chance to step into a life that isn't defined by what I've lost, but by what I can build. Sometimes late at night, I think about Belle, about the way she used to hum while painting, or the way she'd curl her legs under her on the couch. I don't think about Jared or her mother's condescending tone. I think about the woman I married, the one who used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. I think about the promises we made and the way she walked away from them. And then I remind myself that the version of her I loved doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. And that's okay because the version of me that needed her validation doesn't exist anymore either. The other day I walked past the bench at the park where she first told me she loved me. I paused for a moment, letting the memory flicker like an old film reel. Her laugh, the way the wind caught her hair, the soft treble in her voice. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt grateful, because loving her taught me how to love myself, how to stand up for my own worth, how to pack up a life that was breaking me and send it on its way. How to say goodbye. The best revenge, I've realized, isn't about rage or destruction. It's about removing yourself from the cycle that hurts you. It's about choosing peace over chaos, dignity over drama. It's about building a life so full and rich that the person who once broke your heart becomes a footnote, a lesson learned, a page turned. And that's what I've done. I've stepped out of her story and into my own. And every day, I get to decide how that story unfolds. Tonight, I'll set my alarm for an early run. I'll meet Lydia for coffee afterward, and maybe we'll laugh about something silly. A dog in a sweater, a kid with chocolate on his face. I'll come home, open the windows, and let the light pour in. I'll make dinner for one, and it'll be enough. more than enough. Because I've learned that I'm enough with or without her. Always was, always will be.